told you earlier that some senior journalists from West and Central Africa are meeting in Yaounde for an advanced training on environmental journalism in the modern age, and we're receiving some of them here. We have, first of all, Daniel Wesangula. He's a Kenyan. Daniel, you're welcome to Cameroon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Edwin.
Is it the first time you're coming to Cameroon?
Yes, it is. It is the first time in Cameroon, and I must say, I think I am already in love with the country.
Okay, thank you very much. But before coming, what did you know about Cameroon, and what have you seen?
Football, man, football. That's the biggest thing I knew about Cameroon. But what I've seen is a great spirit among the people, not very different from where I was born and bred in Nairobi. So I think it cuts across the entire continent. Just a great spirit of optimism and adventure.
Okay, thank you. Before I come to you, Marco, let me go to one of us, Fidelis Mba from Nigeria. Fidelis, you're welcome to Cameroon.
Thank you.
Is it the first time in Cameroon?
Not my first time, but for a very long time I've not been here. Like he just said, I'm really more like for the people. I mean, what we read outside, what we hear about the country is actually not what's on ground, because I've seen people just moving freely. People are, there's nothing to really show or more like confirm what is being reported out there.
Let's just know, what did you hear?
No, I mean, like in terms of like it's as if the country is at war, but I mean, with what I've seen, people are going about their business, everything is normal. So I think I'm pretty impressed, but I feel like things can still get better.
You reporter for Al Jazeera, based in Nigeria, in Lagos or Abuja?
Yeah, I've been reporting for Al Jazeera right from Doha, the headquarters, and right now I'm based in Abuja, covering West and Central Africa.
No, that's good. See, that's true. Now, I also have my colleague, Immaculate Mkong, from Cameroon. Immaculate, welcome.
Thank you very much, Moki. It's a delight for me to be here today.
Since I asked them if they came, if it's the first time they're coming here, I'm asking when the last time we went to Kenya or to Nigeria.
I think the last time I went to Kenya was 2019. That was during a short training on peacekeeping in Africa. That was September 2019, so that should have been a long time ago.
Before we talk about the challenges reporting environmental news, I want to ask you, Fidelis, what are the challenges reporting, you're a journalist, senior journalist, reporting news in particular in Africa?
Well, for Africa, the major challenge is access. Government people don't want to talk to journalists. Information getting, like documents to, even when government is doing so well, they don't want to tell their story. They're a bit reluctant, because I think it's a case of them not too convinced as to how that news will be projected. So access is a major problem, which is getting access to even officials to be able to even confirm lines. You call somebody, for instance, you might call the press secretary of the president, he's not picking his calls. You might want to speak to a minister, they will ask you protocol, too many protocols. And also, in terms of like going to rural areas, is a bit of a big challenge, because you see maybe there are no access roads and there are no helicopters to fly you there, or there are no airports for you to be able to land there. So sometimes, like if I have to, say for instance, I have to go to a place like maybe Marwa up north, and if there's no road, I would be reluctant to spend like several hours, maybe even a day or two, to go to that place. So sometimes these are challenges, unlike in the Western world, like when I lived across Europe and Asia. Just, you call someone, they pick immediately, and then if you want to go anywhere, you get on the plane or you get on the train, you're there. So I think infrastructure problem is also a very big hindrance to getting news across to the people, because there are certain areas that if things happen, you can't get there on time. Sometimes it might even take a day or two. And then if government officials, especially government officials, will be a bit responsive in terms of like granting access for to journalists to be able to also project them. The journalists are are supposed to be friends to public officials. It's not all journalists that should be perceived as enemies, because most times not just
enemies, right?
Well, you can't rule that out. But again, it's not a problem of a particular country. It's across sub-Saharan Africa. You go from Kenya to Nigeria, it's the same story. Government officials are a bit skeptical when it comes to speaking to journalists.
Daniel, how do you then reports where you don't have all of the sources to tell the story, where you have difficulties getting all of the sources in Kenya, because Fidelis is telling us that it's the same problem across Africa.
Yeah, I think, and that's actually the essence of the workshop you introduced by talking about, because then with all these hurdles that are put in front of us as journalists, how then do we maneuver them? So one of the key things we like to tell people about, I come from a company called Distory Communications, though I have a background in journalism. We try and encourage journalists in this day and age to foster and grow partnerships, not just amongst themselves as journalists, but amongst the people who will have the information that will make news for us. For instance, partnering, if you're reporting on wildlife, for instance, how do you partner with organizations such as the African Wildlife Foundation so that they can grant you access to the places that ordinarily you will not access? They can give you the data that is becoming critical each and every day in our reporting. So for us, one of the key ways that we tell journalists they can use is to just foster partnerships. And as you said, this workshop is bringing in journalists from across the region. So apart from just getting access to the people with the information and the data, how do you work on partnerships to come up with cross-border reporting projects that will help Fidelis in Abuja link up with me in Nairobi so that we can tell a story about African conservation all around the continent. So there are various ways, mostly through partnerships, that we as journalists can leverage on to make sure that our craft does not die, and things that can help us navigate the bureaucracy that Fidelis has talked about, navigate the incredibly hard to reach places that Fidelis has also talked about. So for us, one of the key things that I think will drive even African journalism into the future is partnerships, and I think that is what we've also come here to emphasize in Yaounde.
Yeah, and you've been gathered by the African Wildlife Foundation. Immaculate, what motivated this training? Is it that journalists are not playing their roles as reporters on environmental issues? They're not playing it well, or they have to do something they're not doing yet?
I wouldn't say that journalists are not playing their role well. Like Daniel has said already, the workshop is basically reminding, I would rather use the word reminding, journalists about the possibilities and the opportunities that are available right now to report, especially conservation related issues. And it is more focused on new technology and new media, because you would agree with me that we live, I think the president of our country described our generation as the Android one. And I think he was very correct about that. We have so much technology that has been put at our disposal. We have the social media, which is also the focus of the training that is going on right now. So basically, it's about exposing some of the opportunities that are available online, especially how journalists can use an opportunity like the social media to report better.
And Daniel, we have stories of people being killed in the far north, in Mali, in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon, in Nigeria. What is the need going to be talking about animals in the bush when there are more important things like talking about wars where people are affected directly?
I agree, and there's an analogy I use. If you sit in a typical African village and a gazelle runs in front of you, there are people who will see that as food, and there are people who will see that as resources. But the thing you're trying to say, it's not a choice of either or. It can be we are trying to emphasize the importance of coexistence. We want to link to make the journalist understand that there's a direct link between the environment and the ecosystem they live in, and terrorism and conflict, right? If natural resources are depleted, that will directly put on pressure on the ways of living of the people in that community. So it's not unrelated. So we want journalists in these regions to link the depletion of natural resources to the actual stresses in their communities, and it's very, very apparent. I think across the continent, the advent of COVID, when COVID first hit and the entire continent was almost on lockdown, we saw reduction in poaching, reduction in wildlife trade, but once the bans were lifted, people had no jobs, right? People had no ways to fend for their families. What happened immediately the bans were lifted? Poaching and wildlife crimes went up. So there's a direct correlation between what is happening around you and what we need to do to protect what is happening around us. and your well-being and your security. So that is the conversation we honestly need to have. And again, we want to emphasize that once we get into these communities as journalists, we do not have to tell the communities to choose between preserving a tree and planting maize. We want them to tell the story of how it's possible to have both the environment and them earning a living, because without a livelihood, then these instances of insecurity and all these things that are happening across the continent will not go down. But there is a possibility of coexistence, and that is what we as leading environmental journalists need to preach to the people, to bring them to
no longer find water. And then and also grazing, their grazing path is also depleted, and then they're moving downwards. And the cost of coming to look for where to graze and to get water for their cattle, you see them overrunning farms, eating up crops, and that has brought about conflict. So if people know early enough how to preserve, like now you talk about, do we just pay attention to animals and then not pay only attention to people being killed and leave the environment? If we cut down all the trees, for instance, the environmental problems might even be far worse than the conflict we're having now. Maybe we might even end up and then people are just falling down and dying in droves. So some of these things, I think, we've interacted with experts, they're telling us, and for me, it has been an eye-opening, seminar or training, because right now I'm better informed. And even like now, I look forward to going to communities where they have success stories of having been able to take care of the environment and still make money. So right now I can tell those stories, and also to be able to educate people, not just those who watch Al Jazeera or read our online website, but also people around me. So I'm more like an environmental ambassador right now.
That's what I wanted to say. You're not the person I saw yesterday speaking. I'm raising doubts. The first thing you said yesterday when I gathered, you said, how do you go and tell people this is an animal corridor in somebody's land? How do you tell a person, are you going to buy this land, or you allow animals to pass there? Yeah. So I'm glad you've been convinced and you're not ambassador. Now, Immaculate, what's the situation in Cameroon? Is it the same thing like in Nigeria? Just as early as 2 weeks ago, followed reports of grazier, fisher conflicts in the far north region of Cameroon, with about 11,000 people going to seek refuge in Chad. It should be serious too. It
is serious, but maybe before I answer your question, I'd want to contribute a little to the question you asked Fidelis, because aside being a conservation reporter now, I have also had the opportunity of doing corporate communication for a conservation NGO. And I want to say that one of the main projects that most conservation organizations have realized, and I think during the presentations today, AWF also revealed that they've been doing a lot of work when it comes to economy for sustainable development, where they go to communities and they actually train communities in income generating activities that can actually help these communities not to overexploit the forest areas that are actually habitat to wildlife species. And another thing that one of the presenters emphasized today is the fact that protected areas or wildlife habitat does not necessarily mean that people are not allowed to get into the forest, but there's also an opportunity, or people are allowed to go in there for maybe exploitation of non-timber forest products. Like in Cameroon, I think we have Aero, we have Njansa, and products like that. Forest adjacent communities have the right to get into this forest to exploit this, but they have rules that they must follow to make sure that they don't overexploit the forest and then tamper with the habitat of this wildlife species. So that was just to add to the
what
fact,
you said.
Yeah. And now to answer your question about the situation in Cameroon, I think what has also been at the fore during this training is how the peace and security situation of a country also affects the fate or the security of wildlife species. Because the last presenter we had just before coming to the studio here was actually laying emphasis and describing to us how problems in Faro, in the northern part of Cameroon, have actually caused wildlife species like elephants to migrate from their natural and original habitat to other areas. And because of that, because of conflicts also in Nigeria, there are also receiving strange, in quote, species. So this is just to demonstrate that when there is war, when there is conflict, it also affects the wildlife species, because most people, take for example, in Nigeria or in Cameroon, we have people who have taken up arms against the government, and they are currently living in the bushes. What do you think they feed on? How do you think they survive? So they are actually feeding on these wildlife species. So this is posing a very, very great threat to the habitat and to the wildlife species, because when they go out of food, they have to start feeding on maybe the monkeys, the chimpanzees, and all these species that we have in the forest. So this is just to tell you that when we talk of peace and security, it doesn't just affect us as human beings, but when a country is unstable, it poses a very, very great danger or threat to even the wildlife species and other biodiversity species of that country.
Oh, interesting. Also to add that some years back we got stories that the Janjaweed rebels in Sudan were coming to kill elephants in northern Cameroon to sell the elephant tusks and make money to buy arms to fight. Now, Daniel, where should the battle be in that type of situation? To tackle the market in Asian countries, or to fight the rebels who are harvesting the trophy to sell in Asian countries?
Actually, that takes a 360 approach. You cannot fight one side and leave the other side, because for that instance, you're talking about the Janjaweed militia. They were doing that to satisfy an existing demand, which is probably Asia and Southeast Asia, who have been the main drivers of the main buyers of wildlife trophy. So the approach has to be both ways. You have to talk to the communities and sensitize them on the dangers that exist in them losing their biodiversity through poaching and other ways of erosion. But we also have to make that step as journalists and any other policymakers to approach the market leaders, where the demand is, and have conversations with China. I'm pretty sure that AWF already is engaged the Chinese government in previous years, and through constant lobbying, not just by AWF but many other players in the wildlife and conservation space. Through that lobbying, I think it was in 2017 that China finally declared a trade in ivory illegal in their land. So that's a win, and that only came from constant lobbying between all the players within the conversation step, and also an appreciatory ear by the states that have demand. But that doesn't stop there, because once the poachers and traders realize the China isn't lucrative anymore, they evolve, just as we as journalists and people in conservation are thinking of ways to halt trade. Poachers and dealers in illegal wildlife trade are also staying ahead of the curve. So they moved from China, the demand shifted to Vietnam and many other countries including India. So just to answer your question, the approach has to be multifaceted. We have to get policies in place, we have to bring our leadership on board to enact rules and laws and regulations that will make it very, very difficult for anyone to come into our countries and harm our wildlife and biodiversity. And we have also to engage the source destinations for these products and tell them there's really no virility in you as a man having a pinch of rhino horn before you go to bed, and just debunk these myths. It's up to us to engage both sides.
Now, we have 3 minutes to be together. I want us to conclude, and I want you, Fidelity, to tell us, when you get back to Nigeria, I know you work all over Africa, West and Central Africa, what are your readers or those who watch Al Jazeera going to notice as a change as far as environmental reporting is concerned?
My focus now will be to try to tell the success stories of communities that are doing a lot in conservation, because these stories are never told. Most times, maybe because of lack of access or because of lack of information, I'll be relating with more with the Africa Wildlife Foundation to find out some of these communities that have fantastic stories. Also try to focus on individuals that have actually gone, the extra mile to preserve the environment.
Thank you. And Daniel, The networking you're talking about, would I be able to meet Fidelis in Nigeria after this to maybe do some joint reporting across the border?
Definitely.
On that?
Definitely.
I know you are of Distory.
Yes, group. I mean, definitely. That's one of the biggest things we hope to achieve. This is the second of such a forum we've had. We had one in East Africa. West and Central Africa was the second. We're moving to Southern Africa in the next month and a half. So the whole idea is to connect all the people who are passionate about environmental journalism on the continent and get them to collaborate on cross-border projects that will have great and lasting impact on our environment. Because I think for far too long we've let other people tell our stories. Yet originally, I can bet everyone in this room remembers a story from their grandfather. So we are the original storytellers. So it is up to us as African environmental journalists to tell our stories.
Thank you. And Immaculate, what would be the take home?
I think there's been a lot of take home messages, but because as the moderator of that training also, one thing I do at the end of every presentation is that I try to summarize some of the take homes, especially for conservation reporters. And one of the biggest take homes for conservation reporters now is that we have a new opportunity, which is the social media, and we must optimize the social media to advance conservation reporting. I also emphasized during the training and of course from the presentations that there is business and there is money in conservation. Human beings and animals can live together, and conservation work should be done in a way that will benefit people in the local communities, because usually the problem is when conservation work is done at the higher level and the people in the local communities who actually harness the resources don't get to benefit from the proceeds that come from conservation work. So the take home is conservation journalists now have the social media that they can use to amplify conservation impact across the globe. So it is a call to make use of it and make sure that we save, through our voices and through our pens, we can save humanity and make money while doing so.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. But before you go, Fidelis, I want to offer you a Cameroon meal this evening. What are you going to take?
Well,
you don't know yet.
I'm open-minded.
The guy has avoided my question. He doesn't know what he wants to take from Cameroon. What about you, Dan?
No, I've had Immaculate has been gracious enough to tell me about Ndole and Kati and a few other things. So, but I'm still open-minded to any other thing that come up.
I want to thank you very much, Daniel Wesangula from Kenya. I want to thank you, Fidelis Mba from Nigeria, and I want to thank you, Immaculate Mkong, my colleague here in Cameroon. I also want to thank the African Wildlife Foundation for organizing the seminar here in Yaounde. That's training senior journalists from across West and Central Africa on advanced training on environmental journalism in the modern age. We shall be taking a break, and when we come back, we move to the newsroom to be updated on what would have made news in Cameroon, Africa, and the rest of the world. So let's take a break, and we shall be back.